when we talk about Bryce Young and we discuss those high-end traits, he's not 6'4". He's never going to be 6'4". Going to be 200 pounds. He's never going to have a cannon strapped to his right shoulder. But at the same time, it's the intangible traits that are.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show. I am Phillip Jordan from Last One College Football at 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer, Dothan Woods Football. Welcome in on this Thursday. We are here now on January 26, 2023, and on today's show, I'll be joined by Brent Sobleski, Bleacher Report NFL analyst, also leads up Bleacher Report's scouting department there as well. So we're going to talk Bill O'Brien to the Patriots, how that impacts Alabama as well. And, we'll talk Mac Jones, former Alabama quarterback. With that, we'll get some draft breakdown, the prospect of Bryce Young. We'll talk about him, Will Levis as well. Brent's got a very good article up right now over on Bleacher Report about Will Levis being a first round or potential number one pick in the draft of quarterbacks. We'll talk about that with him. And then we will talk, of course, the AFC, NFC championship games. Let you guys know that is a phone conversation I had with Brent Sobleski. So I'll let you guys know that ahead of time. And also there's probably toward the end of our conversation, you'll hear something on my side in the background at my apartment. On Wednesday, when we recorded this, they were doing some leaf blowing. So you hear the leaf blower in the background. Remember, you check out the Phillip Jordan Show podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also check the show out over on the Phillip Jordan Show YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video, and I'll read it on a future edition of the show. You can also email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. Joining me on the show today, good friend of the program. Always enjoy talking all things football with him. Brent Sobleski, Bleacher Report NFL analyst, also part of the Bleacher Report scouting department. Brent, it's been a while since we've chatted, but I appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me as always, and so just kind of get them out of the way. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, and everything else we might have missed in between.
Birthdays, I think both of us have birthdays in October, so there's some other stuff in there. So happy belated birthday to you, Brett, back in October. So
Same to you, my friend.
So I was thinking about, all the stuff we talked about. Of course, we're going to get into the AFC and NFC championship game and some other stuff. But obviously, I'm in Alabama. So there was some news that dropped this week in the world of football that made Alabama fans very happy. But I want to get your take on all together. Bill O'Brien to the Patriots. Just your overall thoughts on him leaving Alabama after 2 years and going to New England. Obviously, I think this was the best unkept secret in both college and professional ranks with this. But just your thoughts on Bill O'Brien.
Well, I think it's the ideal fit for the New England Patriots when you consider what occurred this past year with the setup and within their coaching staff. It was a major blunder. And stating as such when we're discussing Bill Belichick does not come up often, right? Mm-hmm. But thinking that they would have been capable with the combination of Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, Matt Patricia being a defensive coordinator most of his coaching career, Joe Judge being a special teams coordinator for most of his career, leading the offense was a disaster waiting to happen. And the fact that not only Belichick, but the organization itself did not have the foresight to realize this was not the correct way to go is stunning, essentially, based on how well that entire franchise has operated for decades now. So they're righting a wrong, and they're bringing in someone that's comfortable to them, that knows that quote-unquote Patriot way, that is a offensive mind. We can quibble over how much of a quality hire he is from that standpoint, since I'm assuming most Alabama fans weren't entirely happy with with his progress leading the Crimson Tide offense. So, but at the same time, right, anything over what they did a year ago is going to be improvement. And really the biggest thing here is to make sure you can make Mac Jones comfortable. And I know there wasn't technically overlap between Mac Jones and Bill O'Brien, but at the same time, both of them being under Nick Saban, both of them knowing that system, knowing what the expectations, there should be a good rapport immediately between the both of them. I know Bill O'Brien's a very, very demanding coach, and I know Mac Jones likes to be coached that way. So looking at it from a Patriots perspective, I think you are in a better situation as a team overall, and you need to be, right? You have the Buffalo Bills in your division. You have the up-and-comers in the Miami Dolphins. Even the New York Jets, if they land a quality quarterback, just a starting caliber quarterback this offseason, they're going to be a good team. So you need to keep up with the Joneses, as it were. And I think for the Patriots, they've done so to the best option, with the best option available to them. Conversely, if you look at Alabama, now how many is this? 6 offensive coordinators in 7 years or something along those lines? The constant turnover. It's a positive and a negative, right? It's a positive in the fact that you can now consider a pipeline, that you're getting NFL caliber guys coming down to that level to put in a year or two with Nick Saban, and then they move on for other bigger gigs. But at the same time, you lack that consistency, and there's always going to be little differentiations, even with Saban leading the way, in ways guys call plays, the way they communicate, and how to operate overall. So I think there's a give and take with that situation. I know people seem to be excited about another opportunity to bring someone else in, but at the same time, you have to understand that Alabama today isn't the Alabama we've grown accustomed to the last few years. And by that, I mean some of this year wasn't necessarily that offense wasn't as talented, point blank, as it had been in previous years. Even with Bryce Young, even with some of the other players they have on that team, from a draft perspective, as someone that covers the draft fully, I help run the Bleacher Report's NFL scouting department. That Alabama offense just wasn't as talented as we've seen in previous years. So keep that in mind as well.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you on that one. Now, real quickly on Mac Jones and Bill O'Brien. Now, Bill O'Brien's used to his quarterback yelling at him. How will he take it if Mac Jones starts doing that? Because the previous guy did it. I wonder sometimes with Mac Jones, does he say, hey, the previous quarterback yelled at the coordinators. Maybe I can too. But I'm like, that was Tom Brady. He can do that. You cannot. But I do kind of wonder how that is going to work out, because you talked about Mac Jones is he's a 100%, he's a very competitive guy. And we saw that, I think, this year out of him. Just that's going to be an interesting dynamic with those two, though.
I agree. And, dealing with the chest cold up here in dreary Ohio, it is something that could be volatile. And looking at it, because, there's two things I've always heard about Bill O'Brien. One, he's always prepared. He always expects the most from his players, and that's great. That's what you want from a coach at any level. But at the same time, I've heard this personally, that he was very, very difficult to work with in general. In fact, his initial agent that helped him through Penn State and all that broke off their relationship just because he didn't want to deal with him anymore. So it gives you an idea of the type of demanding personality that Bill O'Brien can be, to the point of overbearing. So when you have someone like Mac Jones that is so invested, that is so competitive, that is so demanding unto himself, there could be clashes throughout the season. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it's something to watch closely to see how they mesh, because the most important aspect for the New England Patriots is to make sure they're setting up their quarterback for success. They didn't last year. Now that is the primary objective for the entire franchise.
Yeah, and Bill O'Brien, I guess the good thing is you're super competitive. You're very demanding, like he is. You're coaching for the right two guys, Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. You're kind of in their wheelhouse. Let's talk. We mentioned Bryce Young a little bit, and I agree with you 100% on that. Alabama offense was good, because look, the receiver position was not as good around him. You go from John Minchie and Jameson Williams to what they had this past year at receiver. Best receiver was Jermaine Burton. Their running back at times was their best receiver this year. But looking at Bryce Young, did you see a quarterback improve? I mean, just me watching Alabama, I feel like Bryce Young may have been a better quarterback this year than he was. This past year than he was, when he won the Heisman. But your thoughts? You just seeing Bryce Young this past season?
Well, anytime you get that extra experience, right, and you're playing at the highest level, that it's going to make you better. Let me put it this way. Either you're going to get better or you're going to get worse. And he seemed to get better. Now, maybe the statistics don't prove that out, but at the same time, evaluate him this year. And this is something that's becoming a major discussion point, something I wrote about this morning. I know we'll get to here in a bit, but just I'm going to use it from the lens of Colts general manager Chris Ballard. And the reason I bring him up, the Colts are a potential team looking for a quarterback top 5. They may be the team that trades up to number 1 overall, maybe the most logical landing swap with the Chicago Bears. Now, Chris Ballard has a philosophy that he wants players with high-end traits, right? So when we look at traits, what are we all usually talking about? Physical ability, huge arms, size, toughness, the ability to run, speed, all those dynamic things that you can quantify. Now, you can make an argument when it comes to Young. He's the anti-Josh Allen. And I'm not using that as a negative. I'm simply stating that he's an outlier on the opposite side of the. When we talk about Bryce Young and we discuss those high-end traits, he's not 6'4". He's never going to be 6'4". Going to be 200 pounds. He's never going to have a cannon strapped to his right shoulder. But at the same time, it's the intangible traits that are on the high end. His feel in the pocket, his anticipation, his creativity, his playmaking ability, the things that are necessary in today's NFL that you can't necessarily quantify, which allows me in that conversation as a number 1 overall possibility, even though he's probably not 6 foot tall, even though he's probably not 185 pounds. And that's okay because the game's changing the way we're protecting quarterbacks. So looking at it, I do think he got better. But overall, I will say this about Bryce Young, and I've written it a couple of times. I think his for the game at the quarterback position is better than anyone else in the class. And that's what allows him to be in the conversation that we're having.
Yeah, and with him this year, and I've said this multiple times all the season, really the last 2 seasons, there's a lot of times at Alabama, their defense was not as good around him. I feel like a lot of times at Alabama, he was asked to put on the Superman cape. And look, more times than not, he delivered. I mean, he almost brought them back, and set up wins against Tennessee and LSU, which were combined only 4 points. So, I mean, without him, they probably are an 8-win team. I'm sorry, Alabama fans. You can tweet at me at PJordanSEC. But that's what I felt with him, with Bryce Young. I mean, a lot of times it felt like he had to carry the Alabama team across the finish line in a lot of games because he just had to put that cape on week in and week out.
Well, that's a great point. And looking at the offensive line, right? You have a couple guys that will be in the NFL. Now, they're not high-end prospects. You're not going back to your Cam Robinsons or Jedrick Wills or Landon Dickersons or guys like that time. There's a couple guys that with Steen and Okoye, or I forget his guard, who will be in the NFL, most likely mid-round picks, but they're not holding together to the same level we've seen, right? They're not dominant point of attack like you once were. And when that comes to the quarterback play, specifically a smallish quarterback, move within the pocket to create those type of opportunities for the entire offense. And maybe it's not always on time with the scheduled play, but it allows him and shows, his ability to do things and create when everything breaks down around him, when he's outside of structure. And one thing I will mention specifically in regards to that is that those 2 traits are more important today than they've ever been in the NFL, right? Mm-hmm. Lack of them generally from offensive line perspective, the inability to find players, let alone actual depth to block for these quarterbacks today is more rare than ever. And it's not that they're less talented, but they're developed less, starting from the collegiate ranks all the way into the NFL. And there's inherent systematic issues with that are dovetailing the overall trench play that we're seeing. So that's why teams like the Philadelphia Eagles dominate, because they're so veteran-laden up front. What do you do when you go to, I don't know, let's say Houston, right? You got 2 great offensive tackles. Your interior is a little suspect. Now you add Bryce Young. Well, he better be able to extend plays. He better be able to to create things when nothing's there, because that's more important today in the NFL than ever. And I think that's a feather in his cap when we come to this evaluation process.
You know, another quarterback, and you wrote about him. We're recording this on Wednesday, the January 25th, coming out on Thursday. But Will Levis, obviously a guy that was a lot of people are talking about as a first round, maybe even potential number one quarterback going this past year. Offensive line issues. He had injuries. The receivers were young. There were a lot of issues there with Kentucky. New offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, of course, went back to the NFL. Now he's back with Kentucky. But just your thoughts on Will Levis. What kind of prospect is he in your eyes?
No, he's the opposite end of the spectrum. Again, he's more toward that darn side when it comes to evaluation. 6'3", 232 pounds, mobile, just an absolute rocket for a right arm, to the point where sometimes maybe he needs to take something off of some of his passes, and that's something you can knock him for as a passer overall. But he's that projection, right? Even though he's much older than Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud by 2 years. In fact, he'll be 24 before he ever plays an actual NFL down. But that upside there. And you have that ability, and you mentioned all the things that I had discussed in my article, that where you can't evaluate him totally on 2022. You can't take away a quarterback's best two wide receivers. You can't take away the team's leading rusher for the first 4 games. You can't lose your 2 best blockers that are both in the NFL and drafted, and still think he's going to be as good, if not better. Now, if you were a pipeline program like Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and you have 4 or 5 stars immediately stepping into those spots for those departed players, then sure, maybe you can have those expectations. But this is Kentucky. And to all the credit to Mark Stoops and what he's done a masterful job to make them nationally relevant for the first time, essentially, since Bear Bryant. And there's a deep cut for you. It shows that when it comes to a player, even of talent level, he's going to have issues, because one thing we try to do, I believe we can evaluate in a vacuum based on what's asked of players, but simultaneously have to keep in mind the surrounding cast, right? And this is my biggest argument against that quote unquote quarterbacks win losses, which I think is the bull in all of sports when it comes to statistics. You cannot win as a team in professional football or any level of football without 11 men working cohesively to achieve the same goal. I understand that quarterback is the most influential position in all of sports. I get that, and I'm not arguing against that. But he can't do it himself. And so when you go back to what Will Levis did, not necessarily in 2022, but 2021, and you look at the caliber of play he had against top competition, the statistics, the advanced statistics, they are all very favorable. So when you make that overall evaluation, when you step back and you say to yourself, okay, is he on par with Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud? I would say he's not quite there, but at the same time, his upside is just as great as both those, if not more so, and that's what you're investing in if you're an NFL franchise and what you're keeping in mind, because some teams won't want Bryce Young. It's just a fact of life that they believe that quarterbacks should be a certain stature, a certain size, have certain arm strength, and be able to make certain throws. And that's going to be Will Levis. So to completely dismiss him as not only a top 3 quarterback prospect, but as the potential number 1 overall pick, I think is completely missing the point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I look at a guy that was really, like I said, good in 2021 and 2022. Was, there was just a lot of stuff going on around him. I mean, it's just like you said. I love that you say that about the win-loss thing with quarterbacks. I think sometimes we put that on them too much. It's not all. Sometimes, they can lose a game. We just saw, maybe Dak Prescott didn't do Cowboys any favor in the division round. But anyways, moving ahead to these championship games, because I also want to get your thoughts on the conference championship games this weekend. Brent, real quickly, I felt this way from. I'll see what your thoughts. Would you prefer that they split these up Saturday, Sunday, or do you prefer both games on Sunday?
Well, for me, it's better, just for purely selfish reasons, because Saturday I'll be traveling to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, so I'll get to sit down and watch both games Sunday instead of having them interrupted during travel plans. But otherwise, I wouldn't mind them split. I know it's difficult for some people, and this is including myself. Look, the the last few weeks with Bleacher Report, we've had to split up certain days. As a father, I'm not just an NFL analyst, people. I have somewhat of a life, but I guess if I was a father of 3, it's not much of one. But I'm still going to my kids' basketball games and things like that. So sometimes it's easier if they're on one day, so you can kind of plan, right? And since it's NFL, you're always like, okay, well, it's Sunday. I can come to the NFL and I can do things. So it's give or take for me. I prefer them on the same day. Again, that's totally selfish, and I'm fully admitting it on air. But I can see why some people would just like to have more football each day to dominate that day's sports coverage. To me, it doesn't really matter. I just have to work around it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I just want to throw that out. I was before we got recording, I was talking to a buddy of mine about this, and I figured I'd just throw that out there as it started. Just at first, the NFC Championship game between the 49ers and the Eagles, which right now the Eagles are 2.5-point favorite. I feel like just me that this. I told somebody, I don't feel like we're gonna have a lot of points here. These are two really good defenses, probably the two best defenses during the year. Two teams that can get after the quarterback. What's your thoughts? What's the big thing you're looking into for this 49ers Eagles game for the NFC title?
Well, we just talked about how we can't put everything on the quarterback, so let's put everything on the quarterback. I think it's just going to be difficult for Brock Purdy, right? And that offense is amazing. And Kyle Shanahan is – I mean, you can make an argument for him, best in football. If not, he was behind Andy Reid, right? So looking at it, I want to see a pretty young quarterback because no matter what we say or how great – he's still a third-string, seventh-round quarterback and started fewer than 10 games in the NFL. Whereas the Eagles have one of the best defenses at not one being aggressive, winning consistently one-on-one matches, but also they have a philosophy of dropping the most in coverage by confusing with their pass coverages, and that's really where I want to see how Purdy develops in this contest, right? And I think that's going to be difficult for him when we look at where the Eagles are. As I mentioned them earlier, they are dominant in the trenches on both sides of the ball, right? Yes, they've had injuries, and yes, there's guys that are necessarily out, but they went out. Most teams don't just go out and get Linval Joseph and Dominican Sue in the middle of the year and be like, yeah, we're good. That's where they're at in their stage of talent and roster building. So I look at the Eagles, I think it's a better overall team. And they have that advantage in the fact that San Francisco is so inexperienced at quarterback, and a guy like Purdy won't know exactly what to do in certain situations. The difference, as I see it, is when he makes a mistake, and he'll make mistakes. He's made mistakes in other games. When he makes a mistake, will Philadelphia capitalize? Other teams that have missed out on those opportunities, and that's to me where we'll see the tipping point of this game.
In the AFC, of course, look, the big storyline, and like I said, and I noticed right before we got recorded that Patrick Mahomes was practicing today, but that obviously is the dominating storyline going into this game, is the health and how effective can Patrick Mahomes be in this game on his ankle that he injured against the Jaguars. And, of course, you got the Bengals. I really feel like this team just got a chip on their shoulder, kind of like they did last year. They're just – with everything going on with them, they just feel like they have that chip, and Joe Burrow's he's that guy. When you look at this matchup, of course, the storyline too, I guess, too, is the Bengals have won 3 straight against the Chiefs as well. Kind of like what we did there in the NFC. What's the big matchup? What's the big keys for you in this one?
Well, I think the biggest one, again, I want to stick to the trenches here, quarterback play, because it's a common theme, particularly when you look postseason. Look, the last time Patrick Mahomes was in the Super Bowl, tried to carry the entire offense. It was a great example of what we were talking about earlier. He just couldn't do it. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers harassed him and hit him around and chased him and did everything possible to make his life a living hell for an entire game. And as such, Tampa Bay won that contest, right? Because as a quarterback, even if you're Patrick Mahomes, even if you still can't do it all. So now let's take away his mobility factor, right? And I'll give total credit to a former colleague of mine, Nate Tice, who cracked me up when he said, I always wondered what Patrick Mahomes would look like with Dan Marino's mobility. Well, now we know. And that's basically what I'm at the moment. And, look, high ankle sprains ain't no joke. This isn't like rolling in your basketball in the backyard with your son or your buddies. And I had a former NFL lineman who I worked with long ago told me it was the most painful injury he ever had. So keep that in mind. That's on his plant leg on top of it. So now think about where Cincinnati is. First of all, Cincinnati has already done a job and shown that they're a matchup for Kansas City, as you stated, out winning multiple games in their last few meetings. But at the same time, who is their franchise player, left tackle, hasn't played to the performance everyone expected. Trey Hendrickson can make all the day. It consistently beats Brown off the edge for like underappreciated guys in the NFL just in general. Dieter and how he dominates the middle of the offensive. Reed Hunt, Trey Smith, and they're great young players, but at the same time, Reed isn't far behind the likes of Aaron Donald or Chris Jones. Conversely, as I just mentioned, Jones, Cincinnati's offensive line has been dinged to high health going into the postseason. You're missing your left tackle, you're missing your right guard, you're missing your right tackle. But the difference is, unlike Mahomes right now, Burrow's capable of navigating that pocket properly, getting the ball out quick, and letting his big-time playmakers do their job on the outside. So those are the reasons why I give Cincinnati the edge over Kansas City yet again.
Yeah, it's like me and people, and I've thought about it, it's like I want to go like Kansas City, yeah, but with the injury, it just limits them so much what they can, what you look Patrick Mahomes, because it does kind of take away like the off-schedule stuff, which is really, what he does so well. And, most quarterbacks, you hate doing that, but he's the guy he's the best at it. So if he's not doing his normal thing, they're just a different offense.
Absolutely. And the thing we've learned about Patrick Mahomes this year is, it's not going to go, right? And Tyreek Hill ain't going to run it down as far as he throws it. This is a complete quarterback, and he's the best quarterback of the current generation. And a guy that just now all the highlight throws that we've seen time and time again, but become a true distributor, right? I like to refer to it as a point guard on grass. Mm-hmm. Can he sit there, find the open man, make the easy throws, and be on time in rhythm with them? And he's done that. He's grown in that area over the last 2 seasons. He's not just a big play waiting to happen. He's actually the best quarterback in football, period. Thing is, not being 100%, not playing against or playing against a defensive front that can get after it. To me, that's the biggest sticking point here.
But anyways, it's going to be fun. I'm looking for this game because I feel like any of these 4 teams can win the Super Bowl. It's really going to be a fun Sunday. All day for both games on Sunday. Not how I would want it split up, but anyways, we'll throw that out there for another time. But Brent, I always appreciate you coming on. I always enjoy talking football with you. You're so knowledgeable about the sport, college and professionally, because what you do covering the NFL and also covering these guys going through the draft process and everything, evaluating them. But if the listeners and viewers who are on YouTube wanted to check you out and follow you online, where can they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter at Brent Sobleski. As I always say, I'm unoriginal, so it's SOBLESKI. All my work's at Bleacher Report. Also keep abreast of what we're doing with the NFL scouting department at Bleacher Report. Again, that's something I help run. We have great scouts, whether we're talking about Brandon Thorne for those offensive line enthusiasts out there, Corey Giddens, who's worked in the NFL, also at multiple stops in the collegiate ranks, Derek Clausen, great when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks, and our newest scout, Matt Holder, who's a graduate of the Scouting Academy. They're all doing great jobs. Follow them as well. They all know enough when it comes to, and we all love to discuss it. So we're here for you whenever you want to talk a little college or NFL.
All right, sounds good, Brent. As always, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road. All right, everybody, and once again, as always, thank you to Brent Sobleski for coming on the show. Could not get through one football season without talking to Brent. And as we get out of here real quickly, my thoughts on the AFC and on the NFC championship game. And as we kind of alluded to there, you obviously got my idea. I do not think that the NFC championship game will be a high-scoring game. I do not. Between the Eagles and the 49ers, the over-under sitting at 46 points right now. I can see it getting way under that. I look at both these teams can both get after the quarterback. They had the best 2 guys when it comes to getting to the quarterback, and Nick Bosa with 49ers, 18.5 sacks on the year. Hassan Riddick has 16 on the season. top 2 defenses in the NFL. The Eagles led the NFL with 70 sacks on the year. The 49ers are good at turning the ball over, and they're good on the differential turnovers. They don't turn the ball over a lot, which goes back to Brock Purdy, who does a really, really great job of taking care of the football and does not put the 49ers in bad situations. But he will be going on the road. This will be a hostile environment, going to Philadelphia on Sunday. So it probably does come down to the quarterbacks. Which quarterback does not make mistakes? Which one makes the big plays? Obviously, you expect big plays from Jalen Hurts from the run game. This team just ran for 268 yards against the New York Giants in their win. Look at the 49ers. They've got all the playmakers on the field. I mean, they got several of them. You got Deebo Samuel, wide receiver. You got Christian McCaffrey. And what's always intriguing to me with the 49ers is just what they can do with those playmakers. It's not just, okay, we're going to hand it to McCaffrey or we just throw it to Deebo Samuel. You can line McCaffrey out at receiver, and you could put Samuel in at running back, which they have done before. And then you got George Kittle there tied in, making big plays, a big target there as well. It's going to come down to really the offensive lines. Which offensive line plays better in this one? I mean, usually that's the case in football, which offensive line plays better, but it's really the case here just because when you see the defensive fronts and if quarterbacks are rattled, thrown off in this one. So I'm going to pick the 49ers to win this one. I think it's going to be a really close defensive game. I think they win this one like 17-14, 16-13, something like that. I don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored. There's going to need to be a big play made. Now, we look at Brock Purdy. Yes, this is his first go-around in the playoffs. He's inexperienced, but the rest of his team is pretty experienced in the postseason. Remember, this is a team that did get to the NFC Championship game last year and lost to the Rams, and they were very, very close to getting to the Super Bowl last season. Of course, like I said, that was Jimmy Garoppolo, quarterback. Brock Purdy now. I'm going to go with 49ers with the experience factor for the rest of the team, but I just see this as a very, very low-scoring defensive game between the 49ers and the Eagles. See who goes to the Super Bowl. In the AFC Championship game, I'll be honest with you guys, if Patrick Mahomes did not get that injury, I would be picking the Chiefs in this one. I just figure everybody said, well, yeah, the Bengals have won 3 in a row against the Chiefs. So I said, well, the Chiefs would probably use that as a big motivation as well. And he did practice on Wednesday, but I don't know. I just don't know how much of he's going to be a factor, and he will make an impact. Of course, Patrick Mahomes will, but being able to use his legs in the pass game, I think it's going to hamper Kansas City. And, man, you got to like what the Bengals are doing defensively, offensively, up front. And Joe Burrow's is playing really great. He played great last week. 9 of 9 to start the game to 2 touchdowns. They were lining up Jamar Chase at running back. They were putting him in different positions. Just all the different things they can do. And I think this is going to be a game that's probably 24-21, maybe 27-21. I'm going to go with the Bengals to win this one. They did a good job during the season of holding Kelsey to 4 catches for 56 yards. So that's kind of what I'm going with. I think your Super Bowl will be the 49ers versus the Cincinnati Bengals. And last piece of business, of course, we talk a little college basketball on here. Auburn's home winning streak got snapped tonight. I'm actually recording this not too long after that went final between them and Texas A&M. Big win for A&M, double-digit victory here. You know, Auburn came out hot. They were 10-2 early. Actually, A&M was up 2-0. They got the first bucket. Then Auburn went on a 10-0 run. Had a 3 from Wendell Green. Had a slam dunk from Flanagan in there. So you had Auburn with a lot of momentum early in the game. So, okay, Auburn's going to take care of business here. And to give credit to the A&M guards, very long, athletic, putting a lot of pressure on the Auburn point guards. Wendell Green got stuck in some very bad situations a few times. Auburn could not hit the 3. I mean, look, that's not a big part of the game, but, you know, they were 3 for 16. They shot a lot of jumpers in this one. I think they settled for a lot of bad shots in this one. Auburn didn't come out with the right energy for the whole game. Early on, it was there, but as you tell, the A&M just wanted this one a whole lot more. A&M now moves into the number 2 spot in the SEC. Alabama did get a win over Mississippi State on Wednesday night. They were down 36-29, but they came back and won there in the second half. Tyrese Radford for A&M, 30 points and 9 rebounds. Their guard, he has been a problem. A&M's been a problem. Last 2 times Auburn's played them, they got beat by them in the SEC basketball tournament last season and now this game here. So A&M seems to have the Auburn Tigers number. A&M hit 6 threes in the first half on average. That's best average. They were 7 and 19. They only hit 1 in the second half. And then in the second half, the Auburn defense played much better. But on the offensive end, turning the ball over, making mistakes. They just could not put up enough offense for their defense to really matter there. They stayed within 8, 9, 10 points a lot in the second half, but they just could not make that extra run because the offense just turned the ball over once again, settling for jumpers, taking some bad shots, I think. So that is kind of where Auburn sits. They have a loss. This is their second loss in SEC play. Of course, they lost Georgia earlier. They will not be in conference play. They'll be at West Virginia this week with the SEC Big 12 Challenge, which will be a lot of fun. I'll be checking out. Schedules will be joined by Southeastern 14 and Established to Pass podcast host, Blake Lovell. We will be discussing the 2 conference championship games, and we'll be talking some basketball as well on Tuesday's podcast next Tuesday, Thursday here on the Phillip Jordan Show. So that should be a lot of fun on that one. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. I appreciate everybody checking it out. Always appreciate anybody taking the time out to listen to the show. Like I said, be back on Tuesday. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also check out the show over on YouTube, the Phillip Jordan Show YouTube channel. Hit subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications. And please leave a comment on a video, and I'll read it on a future edition of the show. You can always email me at sports.philipjordan at gmail.com, and you can read all my written work over at Last Word on college football. Hope everybody has a great, great weekend. Be kind to each other. Remember, always let kindness be your compass. And you have been listening to the Phillip Jordan Show.